afternoon, everybody, and welcome to 2026. My name is Landon Rank, and I have the pleasure today to be with Zach Hiney of the Hawkeye Wire. Today, we are going to be recapping the 2025 Iowa football season and talk about the state of the Iowa football program. We're just going to talk for about 45 minutes just about Hawkeye sports. So if you love Hawkeye sports, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. We're going to have lots more Hawkeye content coming up. I hope to do more streams with you, Zach. So let's jump right into it. How are you doing tonight, Zach?
I'm doing pretty good, Landon. I'm on the backside of a cold right now, so my voice is still trying to recover a little bit. So and it'll be good for tonight. But outside of that, I'm doing good and riding high off of the Iowa Bowl win last week, and my Steelers got a win to clinch the AFC North last night in a crazy football game.
That was a crazy game, yeah.
Things are looking up right now, but Iowa football, very excited about what's going on with them.
What an ending to 2025, and I hope 2026 has started off good. I really hope this is going to be a good year for Iowa athletics. We'll talk about the state of the program, but yeah, that Steelers game last night was pretty insane. I watched a little bit of it after the Broncos game. That's funny because the Steelers are also a black and gold team, so you got all your black and gold teams.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
we look like the Pittsburgh Steelers until the ball snapped. Famous quote by Hayden Fry. So let's just jump right into it. So the Iowa Hawkeyes end the season 9-4, 6-3 in the Big Ten. They go 5-2 at home, 3-2 away. Right now, they're currently ranked 23rd. I assume they'll finish somewhere in the top 20. I would like to see them maybe in the top 18, top 19. Let's just start, Zach, with what are your initial takeaways from this season?
Yeah, from the season as a whole, I think the first thing that jumps out to me is just how big of a step forward this offense took once again. We're 2 years removed from the removal of Brian Ferentz from his role, and a year in 2023 that Iowa somehow won 10 games with Deacon Hill starting at quarterback. I think honestly, out of all of Kirk Ferentz's accomplishments, that might be one of his best is getting 10 wins out of that offense somehow. But after the 2023 season, Iowa's offense was in a really bad spot. They were a national laughing stock. They were the butt of a lot of jokes, and they needed to do a lot of things to repair that, that outside perception of the program. And bringing in Tim Lester last year, we saw some progress. The quarterback play still wasn't great, but it was a bit better when you got Brendan Sullivan in there and whatnot. And this year, it's kind of the perfect, combination of a Tim Lester, plus he finally got his guy in Mark Gronowski, who really came on as the season went on. And Iowa's offense ended up averaging right about 30 points a game, which is good enough to win a lot of games in college football, especially with how good Iowa's defense and the special teams are. And so, for me, that's really the biggest thing is seeing that offense continue to take another step. Mark Gronowski getting better every game. The offensive line obviously was fantastic. The DJ Vanami coming on as a tight end. The running back room was deep. Just really loving the offense and the steps that they took this year. And hopefully this is kind of the next stepping stone into continued success for with the Iowa offense. Hopefully it's not. If 2025 is the peak of Iowa's offense over the next 4 to 5 years, and I think we might be in some trouble, but if they continue to take some steps, I think it's going to be really awesome. And so, for me, the offense was the biggest thing that stood out to me from this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, how nice was it to finally have a tight end again? I mean, we had Luke Lachey, who was a little bit of a bummer. We got Luke Lachey back in 24 and everybody was hyped and he never even caught a touchdown. I don't think he caught a touchdown after the 22 season. So that's the first time we've had Iowa tight ends really make a difference. And I remember when I got on the stream with you about a month ago, I said DJ Vanami was my star player. I mean, Mark Gronowski was great, but DJ Vanami is going to be an up-and-coming player. He's only going to be, I think he's going to be a redshirt sophomore next year, so he'll have 3 years of eligibility. And I think he has the tools to be an NFL draft pick. And it's just so nice to finally get a tight end back here because it felt like for a couple of years it was like, hey, we're tight end university. And I think to not critique Tim Lester, but it felt like he wasn't using the tight ends enough in the passing game. which obviously Tim Lester has said this year's been a crazy year. He had to adjust. He's never had a quarterback like Mark Gronowski, who's a rushing quarterback who runs up the A gap. You know, he's never had a quarterback like that. And I think for him to have a situation like this year, I'm proud of Tim Lester. He, looking at game 1 against Albany, it's funny because they scored 34 points against Albany and they also scored 34 points against Vanderbilt. Very different, 2 different 34-point games. But the way that Tim Lester went from week 1 to, this bowl game, you got it like the progress. And I've heard a lot of Hawkeye fans say, hey, I'm giving Tim Lester 1 or 2 more years. If he doesn't get this passing game going, give him the door, show him the door. And I always disagree with those fans. And I say, this is going to take some time, right? In this transfer portal era, you got to give Tim Lester, this year is my year for him because now you've been here for 2 years. You've had guys in your system. He's done a pretty good job of recruiting quarterbacks. He's done a pretty good job of recruiting running backs, offensive line. Obviously, I don't know if he totally does all the offensive line, but he's done a pretty good job so far in his first 2 years. So I definitely agree with you on that this was a season where the Iowa Hawkeye offense took a step up and they really showed everybody that, hey, we're not the joke of college football. You heard Diego Pavia say on the podcast, it only takes 7 points to beat Iowa, and Iowa just put up on 34 on them. So I think, we are in a different era of Iowa football. It feels different. Like if you remember the Rutgers game earlier this year, we were not built for shootouts like that when, in the first half, it was just blow after blow after blow. And it's like, oh my goodness. And that ended up being the most points the defense allowed all year. And that wasn't even a ranked team. We played Indiana, Oregon, USC, and Iowa State, and we didn't allow 28 points to any of them. So I just think this season, the 9-4 record it looks mediocre, but that is the best 9-4 team I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think there's a real argument to be made that this is the best Iowa football team in a decade. Probably since that 2015 team. If I had to, just off the top of my head, not taking a look year by year, but I think that this is a really underrated Iowa team, and I think it's a team that fans are going to look back on here in a couple of years and just remember it very fondly. I think.
Yes. Yeah.
It's frustrating in the moment to lose these close games to Iowa State and Indiana and Oregon and whatnot, and you wish you could have gotten that over the hump for sure. But I do think, when we look here in 5-10 years, when we look back on the 2025 Iowa football team, I think fans are going to remember it very fondly. Like you had a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Mark Gronowski, I think, is going to end up being a fan favorite as a quarterback, just with how his guts and his style of play, and he's a gamer. And I think Iowa fans are going to enjoy that for a while, and your DJ Vanami breakout if he goes into the NFL and has a lot of success. We're gonna remember his breakout game against Vanderbilt in the bowl game, and the defense playing well, and special teams being good, and Caden Wheaton's special year, like all of this stuff. I think 2025 is really going to be remembered very fondly by Iowa fans going forward. Even despite the 9-4 record. Because as time goes on, you're going to tend to remember the good stuff. Like you might think about the close Indiana loss, especially if they end up winning a national title. Same with Oregon. If one of those two teams, goes on and wins, and at least one of them will play for a national title. We do know that.
Yeah.
And so, if one of them win the national championship, you might think of that loss to that team in a bit of a tougher light. Like, man, we had the national champions on the rope, on the ropes at home, just couldn't quite get it done. But I think overall, we're going to remember the good stuff. The bowl win over Vanderbilt, blowing out Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota.
Blowing out all the rivals.
All the rivals, beating Rutgers in that fun, high-scoring game, earlier on in the season. Like we're going to remember the good stuff, I think. And so, I think that it's going to end up going down as a very special team, the 2025 group.
I agree. And looking here at some of these past Iowa rosters, Iowa seasons, I think my biggest takeaway was this was the return of Iowa football. This was the return of Kinnick Stadium. It felt like in that Indiana game, that was Kinnick Stadium again. I went to games in 21 and 22 and 23 after COVID, and it was loud, sure, but you were playing nobody. You're playing a Michigan State or a Nebraska, and you had two top 10 teams coming to Kinnick Stadium. And obviously, we'll talk about it later about how close Iowa was. But just looking back at this season, 9-4, 8-5, 2023 season you referenced. I think the last really good Iowa season that's underrated is 2019. That Iowa season is so underrated, and that team is so special to me. I love the 2019 season because I just get so much. I know this is crazy to say because it was 5 years ago, but Nate Stanley makes me a little bit nostalgic because that guy would go out there and have 200 passing yards every single game. It was just kind of an expectation for Nate Stanley. Obviously, he had the sack problems, but that team in 2019, I think they lost 3 games by a combined average. They lost to Michigan by 7, and then they lost to Penn State by 5, and they lost to Wisconsin by 2. So they lost by 14 points in 3 games. And then this year's team lost by 16 points in 4 games. So this team was technically better in the losses, but that 2019 team just blowing out USC in that final game, that was the last time Iowa's offense was explosive in the passing game. And obviously, I don't know if Tim Lester will ever get to that 2019-2018 level, but I just think that team, the 2018-2019 teams, were just so special to me, especially.
I almost mentioned 2019 when I said the best team in the last decade because, I do think that Nate Stanley is probably the most underrated Iowa quarterback, in at least my lifetime and at least this century, with what he brought to this lineup year in and year out. He was a 3-year starter at Iowa, which, in the current college football landscape, you probably won't have that, very much unless you have someone starting as a true freshman and they decide to actually stick around for their entire time there. And so it's going to be tough to kind of replace that. But Nate Stanley is one of my favorite Iowa quarterbacks, from my time being on this planet, and watching Mark Gronowski and on that offense putting up points and putting up numbers, was kind of reminiscent of that. It's the first time in over 5 years that we've seen an Iowa offense that you weren't afraid when they got the ball. Like, in the past
game, especially in the Vanderbilt.
Well, in the past, like late game, if the defense gave up a score and the offense had to drive down the field to win the game, you had no faith. You had absolutely no faith that they were going to do that. And now, like this year in 2025, like I had a lot of confidence in Mark Gronowski, especially second half of the season. If 11 gets the ball late in the game with the chance to go win, I feel pretty good about Iowa's chances. And we saw him lead the game. Well, at the time was a game-winning drive against Oregon, and then Dante Moore, showed why he's an NFL first-round pick quarterback with some of those dimes that he threw. And I know they were on their way to leading a drive against USC, and Caden Weechen's, big toe lands, a quarter of an inch out of bounds, and you don't get that, and so it's unfortunate that he is not going to have a couple of those big legendary legacy drives that end up going down in the history books. But I think what he's done for the perception of Iowa's offense, he's got the rushing touchdown numbers to go down in history, and he's just a guy that knows how to win. And Iowa needed a professional in that room. They needed a guy to come in and just calm things down, and Mark Gronowski did just that.
Yeah, Mark Gronowski, and the way he started his career, I mean, they were burning jerseys in week 2 after the loss to Iowa State, and the way that it went from that game-winning drive, I remember I was at a watch party, and I was like, when he got sacked like 3 times in a row, you were like, oh my God, I just can't trust this guy. And then, you put him in that situation now. Oh, I trust Mark Gronowski to go down the field, especially because Iowa State only has 9 players on their roster now. But but no, I totally agree with you. And Mark, it makes me so happy because as a fan, a quarterback is arguably one of the most important pieces of your team. I think a quarterback is a leader, and I think Mark Gronowski's leadership style is something that we've been waiting for. No hate on Cade McNamara or Brennan Sullivan, but I just didn't feel like any of those guys were the best leaders. They weren't vocal, not just vocal leaders. It didn't feel like all the guys around the team rallied around them, right? It didn't feel like, especially with, you look how Cade McNamara ended his career at Iowa. He just walks out after getting a concussion and is like, hey, I'm done, guys. And, what does that show? Like, that is not Kirk Ferentz ball. Kirk Ferentz ball is loyalty. Even if you're injured, you're showing up. And we just see that with Mark Gronowski, and he had a great college career. I mean, 58 wins, most wins in college football history. Obviously, South Dakota State deserves to take the title for him, but we can consider Mark Gronowski as a partial Hawkeye, even for 1 year. What do you think about it? Do you think Mark Gronowski will be always a jackrabbit, or would you say partial Hawkeye?
I mean, it's tough because if you ask the general public who's aware that he exists, they'll think of him as a Hawkeye because Iowa games are obviously more in the limelight. They are on television. They're on your screen more often. Even though South Dakota State is an FCS powerhouse, who's churning out national championships left and right. I mean, he'll be a jackrabbit in his eyes and his family's eyes. But I mean, honestly, I think he'll be welcomed in both places. So he'll probably get his jersey or number retired over at South Dakota State for what he did there. And, he'll never have to pay for a beer in Iowa City ever again when he comes back. And
we have respect for him.
And, I think, what he did as a transfer quarterback is so important, in this current model and day and age of college football. Transfers are just a part of the landscape now. And Iowa did not have a very good track record with transfers the last couple of years. They brought in Deacon Hill, and that was this colossal disaster. And you bring in Cade McNamara, and he flames out on and off the field with some big issues. And Brendan Sullivan was fine, but nothing groundbreaking. And so, at this time last year, because we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of Mark Gronowski committing to Iowa, but at this time last year, if you're a transfer portal quarterback looking at Iowa and you see that track record, why would you want to go?
Yeah,
it's been miss after miss after miss, and part of it's those quarterbacks' fault. Part of it's Iowa's fault. Like, there's blame to go around, but Mark Gronowski, he's shown these portal QBs for the next couple of years, like, hey, Iowa can develop quarterbacks. Like, you can go and win games and compete with the big dogs and put up numbers and put your name in the history books. Like, all of that stuff as a transfer quarterback, like, it's possible. And so I think in this current day and age of college football, what he did as a transfer quarterback in Tim Lester's system under Kirk Ferentz is huge for Iowa's ability to attract talent in the portal going forward. And we'll see if they get a year of Hank Brown or Jeremy Heklinski also playing good football next year. It's just going to keep building that brand back up, and you're going to build a lot of goodwill with potential transfer quarterbacks. And maybe someday down the line, I was able to get the big name transfer QBs, the Fernando Mendozas, the Carson Becks, the things like that. Maybe someday I was able to lure one of those top guys into the program for 1 or 2 years because of how Mark Gronowski and these other transfers are beginning to play in that system.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Said, just to finish this 2025 recap before we move into 2026 preview and everything, I do agree a lot with what you were saying. I think this Mark Gronowski experiment was kind of like, I remember when he committed a year ago, I was kind of like, okay, I'm not going to be fooled again. I was already fooled with Cade McNamara. I was all in with Cade McNamara. Like, I wouldn't say my expectations were low for Mark, but I would say he basically kind of met my expectations. I mean, looking at it, maybe the passing numbers could have been better, but the last 2, 3 games, 4 games down the stretch, I mean, after he kind of got his Indiana injury cleared, probably by the Minnesota game-ish, I think he really just kind of played like I thought he would. And what you talked about, that Oregon game, like, there's going to be a lot of memories that are going to be lost to history. The 87-yard drive, that could have gone ahead to beat Oregon. There's going to be a lot of memories like that are lost in this season. And a lot of times I like to go back and watch old Iowa football highlights, especially when, we're playing an opponent again. And I like go and watch, if we're playing Minnesota, I'll go and watch the 2019 Minnesota game or something like that. And, I'll go back and look at the 2025 Nebraska game or the 2025 Minnesota game or the Wisconsin game. And I think there's going to be a lot of good memories because we're not used to blowing out teams here. I mean, we haven't been blowing out teams for a while. And I just really think 2025 appears to be the year where Iowa took a step up the mountain, where they were trying constantly to get up that mountain, but they took a step in the right direction. And I think Kirk Ferentz knows it, that you've already seen it. First week, we already have 3 guys committed to Iowa in the transfer portal. It's just going to keep adding. So great start. Yeah, 2025 was really a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think 2026 is going to be a very exciting time to be an Iowa fan. You mentioned the 3 commitments in the transfer portal. They got the kicker from North Dakota State, Eli Ozick, I believe. They got the Holy Cross defensive tackle. I don't have his name in front of me right now, but and then they got the the safety from Villanova, Anthony Hawkins. He was our freshman All-American last year in the FCS with Villanova. They bring him in, which is big. And so you've added to your secondary, your D line, and of course your kicker. They're going to need a punter now with Reese Dakin following LeVar Woods to Michigan State, and they're going to need a new kick returner, which I think may even be on the roster in Jackson Nave. Keep an eye on that.
Yep.
On his name next year. But there's a lot of excitement about this Iowa team in 2026. Obviously, there's holes to fill. There's more depth needed on the D line, in the wide receiver room. Ultimately, got to figure out what's going on at quarterback. Replacing some on the offensive line, replacing a lot of talent as well. But I think the opportunity is there, and I think Iowa has a chance to really start the year off fast. They get Iowa State at home this year. Right now, I look at that game and I hate labeling games like this, especially when we don't even know the rosters for next year.
Yeah.
But that's a must-win game.
Oh, yeah.
At home, you've lost to Iowa State 2 years in a row. It's at Kinnick.
We haven't beat the Cyclones since 2018 in Kinnick. We need to get
yes. And the program right now is in shambles. Matt Campbell leaves, and the entire roster basically follows him to Happy Valley. They brought in Jimmy Rogers, and he's going to bring in his guys from Washington State, and they're going to have a roster. I'm sure they're going to have some really talented players there. But that's going to be basically a brand new roster and a brand new coaching staff playing in their first road game in a tough environment at Kinnick against an Iowa team, bringing back some real talent. You've lost to them 2 years in a row. You haven't beaten them at home in over 5 years. Like, you can't lose that game. If you lose that game, I think we're going to have some really uncomfortable conversations about, which program is the premier football program in the state of Iowa. Because if Iowa State can go in there on the road with a makeshift roster and coaching staff and beat Iowa for a third straight year, that's not going to be a good look for Iowa. And so, I mean, it's your first 3 games, non-conference, at home. You got to win there and take care of business. And you're undefeated heading into Big Ten play, which is great because, that sets you up. It gives you a couple mulligans. If you can go 10-2 overall and still make the playoff if you lose to Ohio State and you lose to Michigan. Yeah. Assuming you win out elsewhere. Excuse me. I'm sorry. That's still getting over that cold. But, if you went out elsewhere, it's very doable at Illinois, who's losing Luke Altmaier and Gabe Yakis and a lot of our really talented seniors. And you're home against Nebraska team that you just beat up on. And you're home against an awful Purdue team and Wisconsin, who might be a bit better with Colton Joseph now, but still a lot of work for that program to get back to the level that they're used to. At Minnesota, we know how PJ Fleck is. He's the most overrated coach in college football, in my opinion. Not worried about that. At Northwestern, I like what I really love what David Braun's doing with that program. But that's a game that you probably should win. And then at Washington, that's a tough game.
Yeah, that's a sneaky one
in that environment. But again, like 9-3, even if you beat some teams, it's possible. And if you get one of those 3 wins, if you're 10-2, you're probably a playoff team. Yeah. So excited about next year for sure.
Yeah. 9-3 with losses to Ohio State, Washington, and Michigan would be tough to get in, but it depends on the other teams you play. So I pull up the schedule here. I think Iowa football might be the only team in the country that it matters so much about how they schedule the games. Kirk Ferentz builds this program to look like, they come in week 1 and they always look in the first half of week 1 like they've never played a snap of football. It was 2 years ago when they beat Illinois State 40-0. It was 6-0 at halftime. This year against Albany, it was like 17-0 or 17-7 or something like that at halftime. So I think just the way you schedule this is super important, right? I would like to see maybe the first game of the year. So you play NIU, Iowa State, Northern Illinois, and then maybe you go at Illinois right away. I think that would be a great mid-tier, kind of like you talked about Illinois losing a lot of guys, kind of road matchup to kind of get the conference play started. But really for me, you need Ohio State in November. And I'm going to say it again and again. You need it to be your blackout game in November, mid-November. Get that Kinnick crowd on its feet. Get it to be a cold game, not a rainy game. I'm traumatized from rainy games now, but like a cold game. And obviously, normally Wisconsin's in November, so maybe you go something like the first week in November, you have Ohio State. then you play a road team like a Purdue, and then Wisconsin, and then another team, and then at Nebraska. Obviously, only one bye this year, which is different than what we've seen the last 2 years. I think that favors Iowa actually a little bit. I don't think this Iowa program liked the 2 byes. We're used to just grinding it out every single week. But like I said, you got to play Ohio State in November. I would be okay playing Michigan in October or even that early September or late September. Sorry. So I'm excited. Do you know when they're coming out with the schedule? Because normally they come out with the opponents in December, and they didn't come out with the order in December. So do you know when it's coming out?
I'm not sure off the top of my head when the schedule gets officially released, but I would assume it's after the playoff ends.
Yeah,
I would assume,
yeah,
in a few weeks. I would assume. I would love that at Northwestern game potentially to be that first conference game, because I believe it's their new stadium's open up next year, and so it'd be kind of fun to go play at that new Northwestern stadium. Still not. I mean, I'm still would expect it to be a pretty pro or a pro Iowa crowd there, even with the new stadium. But a nice road environment for Iowa to kind of get their feet under them in Big Ten play. At Illinois is a good option as well. Heck, even if you want to get out of the way, at Washington, I wouldn't mind away there. With those games, it's tough with the travel. Iowa does not play well on the West Coast usually.
So get it done earlier.
Yeah. That's kind of my process with that. But I think the schedule right now, it lines up nicely, and we never know. Things can change very quickly in the college football world. Like if you were looking 2 years ago and you saw Indiana on your schedule, you're probably pretty happy. And that ended up being a lot tougher game than we may think. Not saying that any of these teams are going to become the next Indiana, but teams change and fluctuate all the time, and so. And Iowa is going to change and fluctuate as well. And so, that's kind of the fun part of the offseason. Yeah, it sucks not having any games, but I love the preview and going over the roster and seeing the transfers that come in and the guys that leave. And I wanted to ask you about that, because we talked about the guys that have come into the program, but there's been a couple key transfers as well who are leaving. Who are leaving Iowa City. None that are too surprising for me, but a couple quality players walking on out the door there. Which one are you most surprised by? Maybe outside of Reese Dakin, because I think that shocked everyone, and myself included.
So this one's, I don't really feel like it's that big of a deal, but Jacuzzi Patterson, he has been in the football program since 23. So 23, 24, 25. He's had 3 seasons to transfer if he would. And he's always been our 3rd or 4th string guy. I think he was honestly I understand it now, because 23, he appeared to be like the 2nd or 3rd string back behind Caleb, because Kamari was a freshman too. But I just think I honestly just didn't think he was going to leave. I feel like he liked the program. Obviously Terrell Washington, who I think, didn't he become a wide receiver now, or is it the opposite that he went to? Oh, he did become a wide receiver, right?
Yeah, well, I think he came in as a wide receiver, and then they moved him to running back. But
running back, yeah,
it was a weird switch.
Yeah, so definitely Patterson for me. I'm trying to think if I'm missing any transfers, but besides the Reese Dakin, what about you?
Kel Kolarek, I know, transferred in the secondary. He was a guy that could have, figured to compete for that starting cornerback job that TJ Hall is leaving open, but maybe he saw the writing on the wall with Jalen Watson returning, with Rashad Godfrey.
Rashad
coming on late. I think Kolarek's going to be a senior next year, and so maybe he saw the writing on the wall and kind of wants to go someplace else to get some more guaranteed playing time, because I think Watson and Godfrey, along with Deshaun Lee, gives you a really nice secondary next year, along with Anthony Hawkins coming in, Entringer and Lutmer coming back.
Yep.
So, but I think that's it for it's Patterson, it's Williams, it's Kolarek, it's Dakin. I don't think I'm missing any transfers yet. Wouldn't shock me if a guy like Jarrett Bowie potentially hits the portal at some point. His situation was just so weird, where he was injured preseason, and he was out the entire season. There was no updates. No beat writers had updates on him. Kirk Ferentz, I think, mentioned his name one time in a press conference and said like, yeah, he's just going to be out for a while, and just kind of a weird situation with no updates on that. And so makes me wonder if maybe he's going to slide out the door. But the fact that he hasn't left yet might be a good sign that he's sticking around, because I think he's a talented receiver. Maybe one of the tight ends, older tight ends, like a guy like Zach Ortworth, I think he could see the door. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. Iowa's got Vonami, Thomas Meyer, Addison Ostrenga coming back next year. Lots of talent.
Who's the recruit they're getting tight end?
They did get a recruit as well. It was Jax. No, that's 2027. That Jax DeJean's coming in. But
yeah. I'm trying to think of his name here. I'll look it up real quick. I was just gonna say
it's deep in that tight end room.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just look this up real quick.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say real quickly. One guy you cannot lose for me is Dayton Howard. Dayton Howard, I think, I've heard many good things about him. The coaching staff loves him. I've heard he's a great guy, and I think he's one of those guys. Luke Brewer, that's his name, Luke Brewer. Anyway,
yes.
So I just don't think you can lose Dayton Howard, because I would like to see Dayton Howard and Reese Vanderzee as the two wide receivers. Obviously, I think there's a lot of speculation that Iowa might go out in the transfer portal and get a wide receiver, maybe a guy that has 2 years yet. I'll ask you a question. Do you think Jacob Gill was a good addition? I actually liked Jacob Gill. I know he didn't, have the most yards, but he was very reliable on like third and shorts this year, especially. He had this nice little Mark Gronowski liked to do this nice little thing with him on the right sideline on third and shorts. I thought Jacob Gill was a good addition.
I agree. I think Jacob Gill was, one of their better transfer portal wide receiver additions of the last couple of years. They've had a couple ones that didn't really pan out. Sam Phillips was someone I was really excited about this past year, and they just never really got him involved. Same with Seth Anderson, in the program for 2 years. I remember week one, I think he caught 2 touchdowns. And I was like, all right, they're going to be using Seth Anderson finally in the offense this year. And then I don't even know if I saw him on the field after week 4 or week 5. Like, he just disappeared from the offense. In favor of some younger talent, a Dayton Howard is a guy that I love. Reese Vanderzee, obviously, is very talented. They're going to bring in some more transfers. I think I saw Tony Diaz is a transfer wide receiver from one of the smaller Texas schools, but he's a talented guy who's visiting Iowa tomorrow. And so, Iowa is looking to add more talent there. But I love Howard as well. Obviously, RVZ is he's an NFL wide receiver, in my opinion. I think Iowa needs to get him involved more in the offense. But he's a guy as a true X receiver with his size, with his hands, with his ability to make those contested catches and grabs on the sideline and go up and moss defenders. And if he can add a couple more, a few more routes to his route tree and become a bit more diverse there, because right now he's just kind of a go guy. Hey, run the go pattern, and we're going to throw it up to you, and you make an amazing grab, which is awesome. But if they can get him involved in some more curls, some more slants, some more things over the middle of the field, I think he's an easy NFL wide receiver.
Yeah. Man, this is sad to say, but this was the first year where I think we had a back corner of the end zone passing touchdown in a while. Like the Jacob Gill catch against Michigan State. Well, I guess no, RVZ had the catch against Michigan State last year, but it's been a while since we've had back-to-back games where we've seen just great catches. Reese Vanderzee against Nebraska and then in the bowl game. But, man, it's good. It reminds me of Smith Marset, gives me Brandon Smith vibes, Smith Marset. Yeah. Guys like that can go up and just get the ball down. And, those type of catches you see in the NFL. One of my favorite NFL wide receivers for the Broncos, Cortland Sutton, makes catches like that. Yeah. I think Caden Weegan is an underrated player in the draft. This is just a random thought, but when I think about the Broncos, I really like the Broncos to go out and get Caden Weegan as a kick returner. I think any team in the league's lucky. Obviously, he has some wide receiver skills that can be developed, but that guy's just a speed demon.
Yeah, he's a special teams ace, a return ace, and you see teams in the NFL all the time roster, on a game day, like they'll have 6 wide receivers, but they only really use 4, maybe 5 of them. Like another wide receiver, like they're a gunner on special teams, or or a return man. And so I think you could definitely have Caden Weegan active on game days. He's returning kicks, he's returning punts, and if there's injuries or a situation where he needs to get into the game, he can run some routes, he can serve the purpose there. But he's going to make some NFL team very happy that either drafts him in the later rounds or signs him as a free agent to be that return specialist, because we're seeing just how important field position is, especially in the NFL the with the new kickoffs. Like, you have to put the ball in the landing zone, and so teams are going to have to kick to Caden Weechen and give him a chance to return kicks. And when that happens, we know what we know what he's able to do. And so I think that he's going to make a team very happy. And field position is so important in football, and especially in the NFL. And he's a guy that can flip the field just like an elite punter can. And I'm excited personally to see where he ends up in the NFL, because he's a stud.
He's going to be an interesting guy. So, well, we have about 15 more minutes. I want to go into the quarterback position because I have some thoughts about this. I'm really excited for the future of Iowa, because here's my dream world. I'll give you my dream world first. So I'm a Jeremy Hicklinski guy. I feel like Hank Brown does get this kind of bad rap because of the Indiana game, but you got to remember, he was going up against the number one team in the country now, who has an amazing defense, and he was put in a situation, and we don't need to talk about it, but he was one screen pass away from potentially leading that to a touchdown. So I'm a Jeremy Hicklinski guy. I really like what I've heard about Hicklinski. I do think right now, even though Tim Lester said it's a lot closer, I think Hicklinski has a tiny bit of an edge. It hasn't been reported totally, but this is my dream world. Hicklinski has 3 years left after this year. During this year. So you get Hicklinski for 3 years, and then trade in Ben Singer for, I guess he would probably be in, if he rushes, he comes in next year, right? Trade him Ben Singer.
Yep.
So you'd get him he would have 3 years of eligibility left, because he'd probably redshirt. And that would be my dream world for Iowa quarterbacks. And then nobody knows about this one coming, because I actually know this guy personally, but Tim Lester's son, Cooper Lester, is a quarterback that goes to one of the local high schools in Iowa City, and he'll be coming in the class of 28. And I have a really good feeling that he would be Iowa's next quarterback after that. No one knows about this one yet, but Tim Lester has a son that's in my grade in high school. I would have gone to the same high school as him. So I could see him coming in. Iowa fans love nepotism. They love it when the coach's sons is a player. So I actually have a really good feeling that he would be Iowa's quarterback in a couple of years. So good take. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would love that personally. As you mentioned, Iowa fans do love nepotism. But, when coaches' sons are overly involved in the offense, especially, they are Iowa fans do love that. But all jokes aside, I think. If he's Tim Lester's son, I mean, he's going to know his stuff. He's going to.
Think about it. That's your dad calling your plays. I mean, you hang out with your dad all the time. I mean, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it would be sick. And so maybe in 2029, 2030,
that's when he was coming, because
he's leading the game-winning drive against Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship for Iowa.
I'd be like, man, I know that guy. I talk to a little bit sometimes. Yeah, but awesome. So what do you think about Hicklinski and Ben Singer?
Yeah, so I think Jeremy Hicklinski is my, out of the two, him and Hank Brown, I think he's the guy that I would prefer to get to be the starter next year. Hank Brown was thrown. I've defended Hank Brown because he was thrown into just an awful situation, fourth quarter tie game, a top 10 team in the country in town. Hey kid, go in the game for your first meaningful reps and go win the game. Tough situation for a transfer in a new system, in a new place as a sophomore, a tough spot for him to have to go in and try and get the win. And, so I felt bad for him there, but I liked a lot of what Jeremy Hicklinski brought to, in his limited, role in garbage time this year. I enjoyed what I saw from him. Obviously, the big question about him is his size, because we know that because I believe he's a shorter quarterback, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
And I'm going to check real quick, but
he's not 5'11". No, I'm thinking of
he's 5'11", and so he's not as short as short as I thought he was, but we see some shorter. It's tougher for shorter quarterbacks to have success. Under 6 feet tall. You can probably name on two hands the number of elite NFL quarterbacks that have been under 6 feet tall. The main one that comes to mind is Drew Brees, who is really great, obviously. But so it's the size that worries me a little bit. But I don't like being the guy that's like, the size is the reason why they can't have success. Like, oh, his hands are too small or whatnot. Like, if you can ball, you can ball. And so, I would love to give him a chance. And I think next year is a big year for him. And if he goes in and he plays well, boom, he's got eligibility left. Let's run it back. And if he struggles, and if Hank Brown comes in and he struggles, then you're able to hit the portal next year and maybe go in a different direction there. And so I'm down for Jeremy Hecklinski to be the guy next year.
Jeremy, please pass for 200 plus yards against Northern Iowa and Northern Illinois. There's no reason why we should not be passing for 200 yards. Start off the season right. So I guess while we have like 10 or so minutes, I was just going to say, like, man, this is so exciting. Like that Vanderbilt win, that feeling, I don't know if you got it, but I felt that 2021 Penn State feeling again. Like you kind of feel, I was a lot younger then. I actually lived in Iowa. This is the first time in like 4 years. First time since I moved to Colorado that Iowa would be a ranked team. And just that feeling of like, man, you felt it in your stomach. Like, man, we beat a really good team. And I would argue that Penn State 2021 team wasn't better than that. That Indiana team in 2021 that they beat was ranked sucked. The Iowa State team wasn't that good. That was their best win since 2019 Minnesota. I can't think of a better one than that. That overall, you look at the season, I would say that 2019 USC team wasn't even better. But man, just like that feeling and like the way we go into the season, I thought to myself this season, I said, how am I going to get myself hyped for the 2026 Iowa football season? But it seems like every single year we find a way to get super hyped for the Iowa football season. So, we have about 10 minutes or so. I just wanted to kind of talk to you more about your Iowa fandom. Tell me about some of your, like, give me your top. Okay, so I've only been an Iowa fan since 2015. So we're talking Iowa football from 2015 to now. Which obviously, we're kind of, you probably agree with me on this. So give me your top 5 offensive players and top 5 defensive players since 2015.
All right.
Give you a second to think.
Well, yeah, I think I might try and do this as kind of like an all decade team. So I'll pick a quarterback, I'll do a running back, a tight end, a receiver, and an offensive lineman, and then I'll go over to defense too. I think as a quarterback, it's tough because I have a lot of nostalgia for CJ Beathard.
I don't remember CJ Beathard, so
like, I'll always remember where I was at when he hit that long touchdown to Tavon Smith in the Big Ten title game, and he was very similar to Mark Gronowski, where he was just a gamer. Like he put his body on the line for this team every week, and he was great. But I mean, I'm honestly inclined to pick Nate Stanley as my quarterback on the roster. I think just what he did over 3 years consistently. CJ Beathard had his highs were very high, but some of his lows were, not great. His 2016 season was definitely an unfortunate step back from the 2015 year. But I think Nate Stanley, what he did over those 3 years was great.
Oh yeah.
Running back wise, I mean, I think the obvious answer for a lot of people was Caleb Johnson with what he did last year. But one of my favorite,
Akram Wadley cannot be forgotten.
Akram Wadley was great. Tyler Goodson, I love watching him run, and what he was able to do. But I have a soft spot and a lot of nostalgia for like that 2015 team. Again, that Jordan Kanziri, on that team. Akram Wadley was on that team making plays, but gosh, I'm gonna go with Tyler Goodson. I think I love watching him play at Iowa, and he was just so shifty and fast and able to make guys miss, and he was a lot of fun. Akram Wadley was a great pull too. That was someone that I had forgotten about for some reason, but he was a stud.
Oh, Akram Wadley! I remember that Penn State game. Another heartbreaker. All these heartbreaking games where he had that big touchdown game. So what do you got? Offense and wide receiver, offensive line and wide receiver left, and tight end.
Yeah, I think wide receiver. I'm gonna go with Matt Vandenberg. He was an underrated guy. He was on that 2015, 2016 roster. He was really the number one receiver. Tavon Smith, gets a lot of the credit for making that long touchdown grab in the Big Ten title game, and rightfully so. Tavon Smith was fantastic, but Matt Vandenberg was a guy who's been around. He made some big plays there. He's got a podcast now about Iowa.
I love watching his podcast
about Iowa football. Him and his wife, I believe, and they do a great job.
They do. And
so being able to, hear his perspective is awesome. But he was one of my favorite Hawks. tight as a tight end. I've always been a big TJ Hawkinson guy. Like that's my guy. I know George Kittle, he was there in 2015, 2016. He didn't put up crazy numbers in college, which is surprising when you look at how good he is in the NFL. But like he wasn't an 800-yard receiver at Iowa ever. Like it was small spurts for him, but he was great. Love TJ. I love me some TJ Hawkinson though as a guy. And Noah Fant was he was an incredible Iowa tight end as well. And then on the offensive line, I mean, gosh, there's so many guys you can go with here. I think about a James Daniels on that offensive line and what he was able to do at center. Tyler Linderbaum as well was great. But I mean, I have to go with Tristan Wirfs. I mean,
Tristan.
He was an incredible tackle at Iowa. And I mean, playing both left and right tackle in the NFL and winning an all-pro at both positions is unheard of. And so
with Brady, who else would not want to do it? I mean, I would sign me up for that.
Yes, exactly. And so I'll go with Wirfs on the offensive line. Defensively,
should we just do corner safety, D line, DE? Let's just do that real quick.
Yeah, and then a linebacker as well.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Josie Jewell as my linebacker. That's my guy.
Bronco, Josie Jewell, Bronco. I love it.
Bronco legend, Josie Jewell. He was such a good linebacker. I mean, he was Jack Campbell, he was Jack Campbell before Jack Campbell. He was Jay Higgins before Jay Higgins. Like he was that quintessential Iowa middle linebacker, the thumper. That's making plays, that's forcing turnovers. I love me some Josie Jewell. He is great. On the D line, AJ Epinesa was, unblockable at times. He was a stud.
That Minnesota game in 2019, AJ Epinesa, the Gophers could just not stop him. He's just getting through. Yeah.
AJ Epinesa was great, so I would probably go with him. I'm trying to think of some other guys on that D line that I really liked watching. Davion Nixon, people forget about him because it was the COVID season, but he won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year in that shortened 2020 year because he was so good on that D line. In the secondary, again, it's my nostalgia, but Desmond King is one of my favorite Hawks of all time. He just always had a big play. Always made a big play. It felt like in that secondary. I love watching him play. At safety, there's a couple guys that I think about. Brandon Snyder was a guy that people forget about as a safety, but he made some plays before and after his injury. Was
Armani Hooker a safety?
Yeah, yep. Armani Hooker was a guy that I was going to mention as well. Love watching him play. Quinn Schulte was around for very, very underrated Hawkeye. Like he did all the small things right. And
who was the other guy from Xavier? He was the other guy. He played safety too, I think, and he played on the 21 team. And he got hurt, and he had I think he had a couple of interceptions.
I'm trying to think right now.
It's not Quinn Schulte's brother. I feel like no, it's not. No. Let me look it up real quick. Let me look it up. Do you have any? Are you almost done with your? Do you have one more position, or is that?
I'll pick a specialist too.
Yeah, pick a specialist.
Cade Weechen makes a lot of sense, obviously, and I probably would go with him. But I'm just going to shout out all the Iowa kickers because in a day in college football, having consistency with your kicker is, over a decade span is almost unheard of. And Iowa's just done out guys consistently that are really good. Drew Stevens, Miguel Racinos,
Keith Duncan.
Keith Duncan. Yep, Keith Duncan.
He's the GOAT.
Iowa's ability to just find kickers that are consistently really good for a decade span is fantastic. And so shout out to all the kickers and then Caden Weechen, of course.
I totally agree with you. Shout out to all the kickers. I'm trying to figure out Jack Corner. Jack
Kerner. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if he's a kicker guy. I just was thinking he was. Okay, let me do
Torrey Taylor too. And Torrey Taylor.
Let me do mine real quick, and then we'll get out of here. So offensively, I'm going to go with Nate Stanley. I've watched every single Iowa football game since 2017, so I'm a Nate Stanley guy. I was at the 2017 Ohio State game. That was the game when I fell in love with Iowa football. that might be the greatest performance I've ever seen in an Iowa game. And I don't know if it is in the last 20 years or so, but that was an amazing performance. And then running back, I got to go with Caleb Johnson. I like Tyler Goodson. He was explosive, but what Caleb Johnson did last year where he really just put the team on his back, I think about the Nebraska game when he goes for that 79-yard, I guess it was technically a passing touchdown, but that run, and he's just barreling through defenders. Caleb Johnson was just a guy that, it's just like, put your head down. You're going to have to mess with Caleb Johnson. Wide receiver-wise, I love Amir Smith-Marset. Smith-Marset is – he has a lot of like cockiness to him. He has a lot like that return against Nebraska where he put up that was USC where he put up the piece. I think he did it both, but he had a couple of good kick returns. He wasn't as explosive as Caden Weegan, but he was fun to watch. And even in that COVID season, he was fun to watch. Yeah. Tight end wise, probably got to go. Ooh, that's tough. I really like Sam Laporta. Laporta didn't have as many touchdowns. And I'm not just talking about what he's done in his NFL career, but the thing about Laporta that I loved about him was that he was a reliable target. And especially in the 22 season where the 2022 season gets lost in Iowa history. No one wants to talk about the 2022 season because we all know that was the worst team out of this decade. The 2022 season was the worst Iowa football team out of this decade. Spencer Petras. I was at the Nebraska game where they were playing 3-8 Nebraska. All they had to do was win to clinch the Big Ten West. By God, I don't know how Iowa even got in a position where they could clinch the Big Ten West. And they made it close, but it was not even a game against Nebraska. So, I would say Sam Laporta was a big part of that. What else do I got to do? Offensive line. I'm a Logan Jones guy. I love Logan Jones. What he's done this year, when he's like, I think he said like he never played center in high school. He played defense when he was recruited to Iowa. And the way that he just continued this tradition of Iowa centers is amazing. So I really like Logan Jones. Let's see, what else do I got to do? Is that it on offense or I'm missing?
Yeah, that's your offense right there. Yeah.
My offense. Okay.
Yep.
So defense is going to be a little bit harder because I'm always not 100% sure on positions. Linebacker, I gotta go. Ooh, I like Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell was really nice. I would have liked to see more turnovers first from him, but he was pretty nice. Defensive end. I think he was a defensive end, but was Lucas Van Ness a defensive end?
Yeah.
Okay. Lucas Van Ness. I mean, I think he only played 2 years or 2 or 3, but he was a sack monster.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah. And so I guess Epinesa, he's also D. I'm going to put him on my D line, though. AJ Epinesa. Yep. We already talked about how good he was. Now I got corner. Corner is a tough one. I like Cooper DeJean. Cooper DeJean was pretty good. I was at the Michigan State game when he got the punt return. Obviously, we know about the Minnesota game, but I like Cooper DeJean, but I want to go with Riley Moss. Not just because I'm a Broncos fan, but Riley Moss played such underrated ball at Iowa. He had a couple pick sixes against really good teams. I remember him getting one against Minnesota, one against Michigan State. He was
Indiana too. I think he had 2 against Indiana.
He had a scoop and score call back against Illinois. He was just a dog. I felt like Riley Moss was the type of guy that and I see it with the Broncos. He gets a lot of PIs now in the NFL, but I have a lot of respect for Riley Moss. And so now what am I?
It's because he's targeted so much.
Yeah,
because you got Pat Surtain on the other end, and no one's throwing at Pat Surtain. No one's dumb enough to throw at Pat Surtain.
Yeah, that's why the Broncos have kind of struggled in the last couple of games because teams won't throw towards Pat Surtain. So I guess I have safety and special teams left. Safety. Let me think. I like Armani Hooker. I already said that one earlier. The way he started that Ohio State game off was amazing. Oh my God, I totally forgot. I got to put a special corner because this was a guy that was not mentioned at all. Josh Jackson. Jackson. That one-hand pick against Ohio State, the 2 picks.
A hat trick of picks.
He was great. So that's a special one. But I'll go kicker. I got to go with Keith Duncan. I love Keith Duncan. I don't just love him because he followed me on Instagram. I love him because of what type of journey he had at Iowa. I just can't believe that guy stayed. 2016, he hits the game winner against Michigan. He was inaccurate. Miguel Racines comes in and takes his job for 2 years, and I had no clue that he was still even on the roster. He keeps working, keeps going at it, and then he has a great season in 2019 and 2020 and kisses the Nebraska Cornhuskers away. Man, all those game-winning field goals against Nebraska just are so good, so good. So that's my team, man. Yeah.
All right.
So here we are, Zach. 55 minutes. I appreciate everything.
Of course.
On today, especially with your sickness, man. And winter break is not done. School starts again tomorrow, so it's a sad day, but this made my day today, man. And we got to do this more. If it's monthly, if it's whenever, just DM me and I would love to just talk Hawks. All I like to do is talk Hawks. So any final thoughts before we go?
Well, I was going to say, I also love the talk Hawks, and I've got a show every Thursday. Now that we're past the holiday season, I've got a show on the Voice of College Football every Thursday.
See about joining in and calling in a little bit.
Every Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Time. I am on there. At the Voice of College Football. If you look it up on YouTube, we do our call-in show every Thursday at 6. And if you want to hop on and talk Iowa football, maybe I'll even open it up to some basketball as well and get into that.
We might have to do a basketball pod next, man.
Big into that season. Because they're playing really well right now. But yeah, Iowa at the Voice of College Football. And if you can't watch live on YouTube, it is, it's a video that's there to watch after we go live, and it's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as a podcast after the show. So if you aren't able to tune in right at 6, you're able to listen to it after that. But yeah, I do that every Thursday. It's great. Landon called in a few weeks ago to that show, and we usually have a pretty lively and
I enjoyed
a very fun discussion.
So
that's what I'll say.
Yeah. He's Zach Hiney of the Hawkeye Wire. I'm Landon Rank, future Iowa Hawkeyes coach, GM, sports agent, whatever you want to say. Thank you so much. If you're watching this later, we'll see you later, and go Hawkeyes.